Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The sound of the auctioneer's hammer echoed through the hall, like a shot of Mercy James Mitchell, 35, watched helplessly as his last Manhattan property was auctioned off for a paltry sum. His fingers clutched the crumpled envelope in his pocket, the last tangible memory of his betrayal. The letter from Caroline, his wife, or rather now his ex-wife, coldly explained how she had systematically transferred every penny from their joint accounts to buy a mansion in the Hamptons for her ex-boyfriend Marcus. Sold to the gentleman at the bottom, the auctioneer announced, sealing the fate of the last fragment of the real estate empire that James had built up over 15 years. That night, as he walked through the busy streets of New York with just a suitcase and his Armani suit, ironically a gift from Caroline last Christmas, James tried to process how his life had fallen apart so quickly. Just 3 months ago, he was one of the most respected real estate brokers in the city with an impressive portfolio and an even more impressive bank account. Mr. Mitchell, a female voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Gloria, his former secretary, with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, if there's anything I could do," James forced a smile. "Thank you, Gloria. You've already done more than enough by alerting me to the suspicious transfers." It was I who was too foolish to believe her explanations. With no options in Manhattan, James took a train to Rhinebeck, a small town in upstate New York where his uncle Harold owned a small abandoned hovel. The place was simple, practically falling apart, but it was his only refuge at the moment. The first few weeks were an exercise in humility. The man who used to choose between Michelin-starred restaurants was now counting coins to buy instant noodles at the local grocery store. The shack had leaks, the heater worked when it wanted to, and the furniture was old enough to have witnessed the Civil War. It was during one of these lonely nights, while trying to fix the roof with skills he didn't possess, that James met Rachel Sullivan. She was walking down the street when she saw him balancing precariously on the stairs, cursing softly as the rain began to fall. "You're going to kill yourself that way," she shouted, running to the ladder to hold it. "And as far as I can see, that makeshift patch won't last until tomorrow." Rachel was a piano teacher at the local school, and as James soon discovered, had a natural talent for home repairs inherited from a builder father. Not only did she help him with the roof that night, but she also brought a home-cooked meal that made James realize how long it had been since he had eaten something lovingly prepared. "You know," she commented as they shared the stew sitting on the living room floor, because James didn't have a table yet, "this place's potential, with a few strategic renovations, it could become a charming bed and breakfast." Rachel's suggestion planted a seed in James' mind. Little by little, between lessons in basic repairs and impromptu dinners, a friendship began to blossom. Rachel not only taught him how to fix broken things in his house, but inadvertently helped him repair something deeper inside him, a self-esteem. "You haven't lost your talent for business, James," she said one evening as he showed off his old real estate projects. "You just temporarily lost confidence in it." Rachel's constant presence brought more than just comfort. She introduced James to the local community, including his students and their parents. Soon, he began to notice a pattern in the conversations. Many tourists were looking for charming accommodation in Rhinebeck, but the options were limited. With the last of the money he had saved in a separate account, a precaution Gloria had convinced him to take during his last days in Manhattan, James began renovating the hovel. To community, touched by his story and captivated by his determination, joined in the project. The father of one of Rachel's students was a contractor and offered discounted labor. Another was a carpenter and helped with the furniture. As the hovel gradually changed, James felt something changing inside him too. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, every problem solved was a small victory over his past, and Rachel was there not just as support, but as a partner who believed in him even when he doubted himself. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she said one evening as they painted what would be the future living room together. "But you're proving to yourself that you're much stronger than you thought." As fall turned to winter, the cottage began to take shape, as did James' feelings for Rachel. It wasn't the overwhelming passion he had felt for Caroline, but something deeper, built on a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual admiration. One evening, while it was snowing outside, James found Rachel playing the piano at the local school. She was practicing for a charity recital, her hands dancing over the keys with grace and precision. Watching her, James realized that for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about Caroline or what he had lost. Instead, he was thinking about what he had gained: a new perspective, a new purpose, and perhaps a new chance at love. The sound of the piano echoed down the empty corridor of the school, and James felt something awaken in his chest, no longer that sharp pain of betrayal, but a gentle growing hope like the first notes of a new song beginning to play dawn in. Rhinebeck brought with it a new perspective for James as he watched the dew cover the hovel's unkempt garden. His hands held a cup of cheap coffee, a luxury he now appreciated more than any refined drink he used to have in Manhattan. The soft sound of a piano coming from the house next door made him smile, involuntarily reminding him of Rachel and his first week in that small town. "You should give the place a try," Rachel had said, appearing on his doorstep that morning with a homemade apple pie. Rhinebeck has its own charm, even if it's not Manhattan. James discovered that Rachel was right. The city, with its tree-lined streets and historic buildings, emanated a welcoming atmosphere that Manhattan, with all its glamour, never managed to offer. People greeted him on the street, even if they didn't know him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel judged for what he had or what he had lost during a particularly productive afternoon of renovation, while Rachel was helping him restore the wood paneling in the living room. James received an unexpected call from Gloria, his former secretary. "Caroline is looking for you," Gloria informed him, her voice tense. "Marcus abandoned her as soon as he found out the money ran out. She's trying to contest the divorce." James felt a tightening in his chest, but it was no longer the tearing pain of the first few days. "Thanks for letting me know, Gloria, but that doesn't change anything," he replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Rachel, who had stopped sanding the wood when she noticed his tense expression, approached with concern. "Is everything all right?" "It is now," he replied, turning his attention back to the work in progress. "You know, I think you were right about turning this place into a bed and breakfast." The next few days were filled with planning and research. James rediscovered his talent for market analysis, studying local tourist demand and trends in the hotel sector in small towns. Rachel, in between her piano lessons, devoted her free time to helping him develop a viable business plan. "You could use the main hall for musical events," she suggested one day, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I have several talented students who would love to perform, and this could attract a different audience." Rachel's idea triggered an avalanche of possibilities. James began to envision not just cozy guest rooms, but a cultural space that could become the heart of the local community. The hovel, which initially seemed like his personal purgatory, was turning into a promise of redemption. During a visit to the local bank to discuss financing possibilities, James met Frank Morrison, the father of one of Rachel's students and owner of a small construction company. "Rachel told me about your project," Frank commented, extending his business card. "Can I take a look at the structure of the place? I have some ideas that might help you optimize the space without breaking your budget." Word of James' project spread quickly through the city. Soon, other members of the community started coming forward with offers of help. Martha, a retired interior designer, offered to help with the decorating. Robert, the owner of the building materials store, offered a generous installment agreement. "That's how things work in small towns," Rachel explained as they shared a pizza on the newly renovated veranda. "People help each other out because they know that one day they might need help too." As the project progressed, James realized that he was building more than a business. He was building real relationships. Each person who got involved in the project brought with them not just practical skills, but stories, advice, and a different outlook on life. One evening, after a long day at work, Rachel invited him to her home for dinner. It was a modest but cozy home filled with photographs of students and musical scores. While she prepared a simple but delicious dinner, James watched her move around the kitchen with the same grace she showed at the piano. "You know," she began as she poured herself a glass of wine, "when you first came here, you seemed to be carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Now, even with all the hard work of the renovation, you seem lighter." James reflected on his words. It was true, the pain of Caroline's betrayal was still there, but it had turned into something different, like a scar that reminds you not only of the wound, but also of the healing. "I think I've learned that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what really matters," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. The moment was interrupted by the sound of James' cell phone. It was Gloria again, this time with news about Caroline's attempt to locate her new bank accounts. But this time, instead of anxiety, James felt only determination. His ex-wife no longer had any power over his future. "You don't have to face this alone," Rachel said softly, placing her hand on his. In that instant, with the warmth of her hand and the silent promise in her eyes, James understood that his heart, like the old cottage, was ready for a new makeover. The news spread through Rhinebeck like fire through dry straw. The hovel on Maple Street was being transformed into something extraordinary. James watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety as Frank Morrison and his team installed the last windows in what would become the bed and breakfast common area of the project that had begun as a last resort had become his obsession, his path to redemption. "The finishes are impeccable," commented Rachel, arriving unannounced as she usually did. She carried her folder of sheet music and a radiant expression that made James' heart race. "I can't wait to see the music room ready." The transformation of the space was almost complete. What had once been a decaying hovel now displayed a rustic elegance that perfectly matched Rhinebeck's historic charm. The walls, once stained and peeling, now sported a soft shade of colonial blue, carefully chosen by Martha, the retired designer. During a break at work, James received a phone call that upset him. His lawyer in Manhattan informed him that Caroline had managed to locate his new address and was planning a visit. The news hit him like a punch in the gut. "She can't hurt you anymore," Rachel said firmly, sensing his unease. "You've built something new here, something of your own." That evening, as they organized the future music room, James watched Rachel test the acoustics by playing a few notes on the newly acquired piano, a bargain they had found at a local auction. The soft melody seemed to dance between the exposed beams of the ceiling, filling the space with a new and hopeful energy. "Do you know what this place needs?" Rachel asked, interrupting her music. "A name that captures its essence." The suggestion sparked a series of lively discussions with the locals who had been involved in the project over an impromptu dinner in a newly refurbished kitchen. Amid laughter and shared stories, the name emerged: Harmony House. The name seemed perfect. It represented not only the music that would fill its corridors, but also the harmony that James had found in that small community. It was a symbol of how different elements could come together to create something beautiful and meaningful. The opening date was set for early spring, coinciding with the town's music festival. Rachel had organized the special performance with her best students, turning the event into a celebration of art and community. It was during the final preparations that Caroline appeared. James saw her through the library window, her Porsche standing out on the quiet street like a stain on a clean canvas. She looked different, the artificial glamour of Manhattan replaced by a more tired and real appearance. "James," she called out, her voice trembling slightly, "can we talk?" Before he could answer, Rachel appeared at his side, her silent presence offering strength and support. Caroline watched the interaction between the two with an expression that mixed surprise and something close to regret. "There's nothing to talk about, Caroline," James replied with a calm that surprised even himself. "You made your choices, I made mine." The conversation was brief and surprisingly civilized. Caroline tried to explain her motives, to mention her regrets, but her words rang hollow against the background of laughter from the volunteers, helping with the final preparations upstairs. When she left, James stood on the balcony for a long moment. Watching the car drive away, Rachel entwined her fingers in his, and the simple gesture carried more meaning than all the jewelry Caroline had ever worn. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. "Better than fine," he replied, turning to admire the renovated facade of Harmony House. "I'm exactly where I should be." The days leading up to the inauguration were a whirlwind of activity. The community mobilized in a way that James had never experienced in Manhattan. The local florist decorated the hall with elaborate arrangements, the baker prepared artisanal delights for breakfast, and even the local newspaper ran a story about the transformation of the old hovel. The night before the grand opening, after everyone had left, James and Rachel walked through the silent corridors of Harmony House, checking every detail. One last time, moonlight streamed in through the French windows, creating delicate patterns on the restored wooden floor. "I still remember your first day here," Rachel commented, stopping at the exact spot where they had met. "You looked so lost, and you found me." James replied, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made the air between them vibrate with unspoken possibilities. The moment was interrupted by the soft sound of the piano in the music room. One of Rachel's students had forgotten the sheet music and had come back for deciding to play a few notes before leaving. The melody floated through the air like a promise, reminding James that sometimes the best symphonies in life begin with a single note of hope. Today of Harmony House's opening dawned with a special energy hanging in the air. James was adjusting his tie in front of the antique mirror in the master bedroom, his slightly trembling hands reflecting the anxiety of the moment. The sound of excited voices was already echoing through the first floor, where the first guests were beginning to arrive for the inaugural breakfast. "Take a deep breath." Rachel appeared in the doorway, stunning in a navy blue dress that highlighted her eyes. "You've turned an abandoned hovel into a dream. Today is the day to celebrate that." The main hall was unrecognizable. Strategically placed floral arrangements complemented the rustic, elegant decor. Martha had created the aroma of freshly baked bread and freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft notes of the piano where one of Rachel's most talented students was playing classical compositions. The opening ceremony attracted not only locals, but also journalists from publications specializing in tourism and hospitality. James' story of overcoming obstacles had caught the attention of the regional media, and Harmony House was already booked out for the next 3 months. Mr. Mitchell called out Lisa Bennett, a reporter from Hudson Valley Living. "How does it feel to see your project finished?" Before James could answer, a familiar face emerged from the crowd. Gloria, his former secretary, had traveled from Manhattan to attend the event. Her eyes glistened with restrained tears as she watched the transformation, not only of the space but of James himself. "I always knew you'd recover," Gloria whispered, hugging him. "But this exceeds all expectations." The morning passed like a well-orchestrated dream. The guests circulated through the rooms, admiring every detail. The themed rooms, each decorated with elements that told a different story. The cozy library, with its carefully selected collection, and the winter garden, where restored antique tables invited moments of contemplation. The highlight of the celebration would be a recital by Rachel students in the early evening. While the final preparations were being made, James received an unexpected phone call. It was Marcus, Caroline's ex-boyfriend. "James the first, I'm so sorry for everything." His voice sounded genuinely regretful. "Caroline manipulated me as much as she manipulated you. I've just seen the article about your new online venture. You've achieved something extraordinary." The call, which months ago would have unleashed a storm of emotion, now provoked only mild discomfort. James realized that forgiveness wasn't just a word, it was a healing process that happened naturally when you found a new purpose. As the sun set, the music hall began to fill up. Rachel coordinated her students backstage while James watched in amazement as every detail felt perfectly in place. The soft lights, the floral arrangements, the perfect acoustics, everything contributed to creating a magical atmosphere. "Welcome to Harmony House," James began his speech, his firm voice echoing through the hall. "This place was born out of loss, but has grown through love for music, for community, for the chance to start again." His eyes met Rachel's in the front row, and in that moment the whole journey made sense. Every challenge, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led them there. The recital was an absolute success. Young talents took turns at the piano, filling the room with melodies that seemed to give the walls of Harmony House a life of their own. And between performances, Rachel took to the stage for a special performance, an original composition she had written inspired by the history of the place's transformation. The first notes Rachel played silenced the audience. The melody began softly, almost hesitantly, like James' first days in Rhinebeck. Progressively, it gained strength and complexity, reflecting the challenges and small victories along the way. The end was an explosion of hope and possibilities, just as Harmony House had become after the event. As the last guests said their goodbyes and the first guests settled into their rooms, James and Rachel walked through the garden lit by antique lanterns. The night air carried a promise of spring, and with it of new beginnings. "Do you know what impresses me most?" Rachel asked, stopping next to the small, ornamental pond they had built. "It's not just the physical transformation of the place, it's how you've managed to turn a story of betrayal into something so full of meaning and beauty." James held her hand, feeling the familiar electric current that always ran through his body when he touched her. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "You didn't just help me rebuild this place, you helped me rebuild myself." The moment was interrupted by Sons, one of the first guests, who approached enthusiastically to share his impressions of the place. He was a writer looking for inspiration for his next novel, and according to him, Harmony House was exactly the refuge he was looking for. Watching the interaction, Rachel smiled, knowing that each guest who passed through would take with them not only memories of a pleasant stay, but a piece of the story of overcoming that. The walls of Harmony House held. The evening progressed, and with it the certainty that some endings are in fact just the beginning of much more beautiful stories. James looked at his creation, at Rachel, at the starry Rhinebeck sky, and knew that he had found not just a new home, but his true place in the world. The success of Harmony House exceeded all expectations. In the months following the opening, James watched with satisfaction as the reservation book filled up quickly, bringing in guests from different parts of the country. Each visitor seemed to contribute their own note to the unique melody that the place had become. One particularly busy morning, while Supervising the guests' breakfast, James received an unexpected call from a PBS producer. The channel was planning a documentary series on stories of American reinvention and wanted to feature Harmony House as one of the highlights. "Your establishment represents exactly the kind of narrative we're looking for," explained the producer, "a story of loss transformed into triumph through the strength of community." Rachel, who was adjusting the piano for an evening performance, approached when she noticed James' pensive expression after the phone call. "Good news or bad news?" "Different," he replied, sharing the details of the conversation. "They want to do the shoot during the music festival next month." The music festival had become an even more special event since Harmony House had established itself as a cultural meeting point for the region. Rachel had expanded the program to include masterclasses with renowned musicians, and her connections in the world of classical music were bringing extraordinary talent to Rhinebeck. Between the preparations for the festival and the filming of the documentary, James and Rachel found increasingly frequent moments of closeness. Their fingers would accidentally touch while organizing scores, their gazes would linger during planning meetings, and the air between them carried an electricity that everyone around could sense. One evening, while they were going over the last details of the festival in James' office, an unexpected thunderstorm surprised them. Rachel approached the window to watch the rain, her silhouette cut out by the occasional lightning bolt. "Remember the first time we met?" she asked, turning to face him. "It was raining too." James got up from his desk and walked over to her. "How could I forget? You saved more than just my roof that day." The moment was interrupted by Martha, who rushed in with fabric samples for the music room's new curtains. The retired designer cast a knowing glance at the couple before diving into discussions about patterns and colors. The PBS crew arrived a week before the festival, transforming the quiet routine of Harmony House into a production set. The cameras captured not only the physical beauty of the place, but also the small interactions that made it special. The breakfast shared between guests who arrived as strangers and left as friends, Rachel's piano lessons echoing through the corridors, the community gatherings that took place spontaneously in the garden. During one of the interviews, the producer asked James about his personal transformation. "How did you manage to overcome betrayal and create something so meaningful?" James looked through the office window where Rachel was rehearsing with a group of students in the garden gazebo. "I've learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find something more valuable," he replied. "Harmony House isn't just a business for me, it's a testament to the power of human kindness." The festival was fast approaching, and with it a growing sense that something important was about to happen. James found Rachel practicing alone in the music hall late at night, her hands dancing over the keys to a tune he had never heard before. "It's beautiful," he commented, taking a seat next to her on the piano bench. "New composition?" Rachel blushed slightly. "It's something I've been working on, about how music has brought us together, about how some stories need the right time to be told." The silence that followed her words was laden with unspoken promises. James realized that he was tired of dancing around his feelings, of pretending that what existed between them was just friendship. "Rachel," he began, his voice softer than a whisper, "I think the time has come for us to be honest with each other." Before he could continue, distant thunder announced another approaching storm, and the moment seemed frozen in time, like a sustained note in an unfinished symphony. The music festival transformed Harmony House into a veritable whirlwind of activity. PBS cameras captured every significant moment while nationally renowned musicians roamed the historic halls. James watched everything with a mixture of pride and anxiety, mainly because his heart was torn between the responsibilities of the event and his unresolved feelings for Rachel. The storm interrupted conversation that night in the music hall, hum between them like an unfinished melody. In the days that followed, they both plunged into work, using the hustle and bustle of the festival as an excuse to avoid the inevitable. "Pianist Benjamin Crawford has arrived early for rehearsal," announced Martha, interrupting James' thoughts. Rachel is showing him around the music room. James found the two engaged in a lively discussion about acoustics. Benjamin, a renowned pianist from Boston, seemed especially interested not only in the piano, but also in the teacher who was introducing him. His sophisticated charm and deep musical knowledge created a dynamic that made James' stomach churn. "Miss Sullivan, your reputation as a teacher is known even in Boston," Benjamin commented, his elegant smile directed exclusively at Rachel. "Perhaps we could discuss some professional opportunities over dinner." Before Rachel could respond, the documentary crew entered the room, requesting an interview with James about the history of the site's transformation. He reluctantly turned away, casting one last glance at Rachel, who was now smiling in response to something Benjamin had said during the interview. James tried to concentrate on the questions, but his thoughts kept returning to the music hall. Harmony House represents second chances. He explained to the camera, his voice carrying a deeper meaning than he had intended. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find the courage to fight for what really matters. In the evening during the festival's opening cocktail party, Harmony House glowed with a special energy. Soft lights illuminated the garden, where musicians and guests mingled in animated conversation. James watched from afar as Benjamin monopolized Rachel's attention. Their elegant gestures and shared laughter creating an intimacy that bothered him deeply. "You're being a fool, you know," that Martha approached, offering a glass of champagne. "That woman has been waiting for you to make a move for months." "It's complicated," James sighed, his eyes still fixed on Rachel. "No, it's not," Martha retorted with her characteristic frankness. "You're just afraid of being happy again. But let me tell you a secret, some songs can only be played with four hands." Martha's words echoed in his mind throughout the evening. When the last guest left, James found Rachel alone in the winter garden, gazing at the starry sky through the glass roof. "Benjamin offered me a position at the conservatory in Boston," she revealed without turning around. "A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, according to him." James' heart seemed to freeze. Are you going to accept?" Rachel finally turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That depends." "On what?" "On you giving me a reason to stay." The moment that followed seemed eternal. All the doubts, all the fears James had carried since Caroline's betrayal seemed insignificant in the face of the possibility of losing Rachel. Ever since he showed up on that rainy night, he began, his voice trembling slightly. "You haven't just helped me rebuild this place, you've helped me rebuild my ability to trust, a dream to love." Rachel took a step towards him, her expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability. "Go on. The song you wrote about us," James continued, finding courage in the depths of his eyes. "I also have a story to tell. It's about a man who thought he had lost everything until he found something infinitely more precious, something he almost let go of out of fear." "And how does that story end?" Rachel asked softly, now so close that James could smell her soft perfume. "That depends on the next note we play," he replied, finally eliminating the distance between them. The kiss that followed was like a perfect symphony, soft at first, growing in intensity and emotion, each movement in perfect harmony. When they broke apart, they both knew that something fundamental had changed, like a new melody taking shape. "I guess Boston will have to find another piano teacher." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with a happiness that made her whole face glow. The moment was captured by the PBS cameras, which were silently filming from the garden. The producer smiled, knowing that he had recorded the true heart of the Harmony House story, not just the story of professional overcoming, but of emotional rebirth. As the evening progressed, James and Rachel remained in the winter garden, planning not only the rest of the festival, but a future together. Harmony House would remain a testament to how music can heal broken hearts and create new symphonies of love. The crew of the PBS documentary were making the final lighting adjustments in the main hall of the Harmony House, preparing for the final scene of filming. James was adjusting his navy blue suit, a gift from Rachel for the upcoming special occasion. The music festival had ended the night before with resounding success, but today would be an even more significant day. "Is everything ready?" asked Martha, hurrying into James' office. Her eyes shone with the excitement of an accomplice who had helped orchestrate every detail of what was to come. "Almost," James replied, his heart racing as he thought about the plan he had meticulously drawn up over the last few weeks. "Is Rachel still giving her last lesson of the day?" Martha nodded, a conspiratorial smile on her lips. "And she doesn't suspect a thing. Benjamin helped us a lot by pretending to have gone back to Boston yesterday." The pianist, who had initially seemed like a threat, had become a valuable ally in James' plan. In fact, it was during a conversation with Benjamin that the idea began to take shape. "A woman like Rachel deserves something extraordinary," Benjamin had said, "something that combines music and love in a unique way." The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions since that night in the winter garden. James and Rachel had finally admitted their feelings, turning Harmony House into a true testament to their growing love. Every corner of the place held memories of shared moments, kisses stolen between daily chores, deep conversations in the silent early hours, music and laughter echoing through the corridors. James' transformation was complete. The broken man who had arrived in Rhinebeck had become someone new, someone stronger and more complete. Caroline's betrayal, which had once seemed like the end of everything, was now just a necessary chapter in his journey to Rachel. At 6 o'clock sharp, exactly as planned, the first guests began to arrive discreetly at the back of Harmony House. The entire community had mobilized to keep it a surprise. Rachel's students, their families, musicians from the festival, even Gloria had flown in from Manhattan, especially for the occasion. James, Rachel's voice echoed down the corridor. "Why is it so dark in here?" Following the plan, the lights in the music hall came on softly, revealing a transformed setting. Candles floated in small water arrangements, white flowers decorated every surface, and in the center of the hall the black piano gleamed in the soft light. Rachel stopped in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise, as she saw Benjamin sitting at the piano, beginning to play the melody she had composed about her story with James, the psalm she had never finished. "I thought you'd gone back to Boston," she said, confused, "and missed the end of this story." Benjamin smiled, continuing to play. "Impossible." The notes of the song filled the air as James emerged from the shadows, approaching Rachel. Their eyes met, and in that moment all the noise in the world seemed to disappear. "Rachel Sullivan," James began, his voice laced with emotion. "When you found me on that roof one rainy night, I was as broken as those tiles, but you didn't just see a defeated man, you saw possibilities. You taught me that sometimes we need to lose a song we know in order to discover an even more beautiful melody." Tears began to stream down Rachel's face as James knelt down, pulling a small velvet box out of his pocket. "This song you wrote about us, it's incomplete because our story has only just begun. Would you do me the honor of composing the rest of it with me?" The whole hall held its breath. Benjamin softened the notes on the piano, creating a perfect musical background for the moment. "Yes." Rachel replied, her voice barely a whisper, 1,000 times. "Yes." The hidden guests emerged from their hiding places, clapping and celebrating as James slid the ring, a delicate piece of white gold with a tiny musical note in diamonds, on Rachel's finger. Benjamin began to play a new melody, one he had composed especially for the occasion, combining elements of Rachel's music with new notes that symbolized the future that was opening up before them. "So that's why you were so mysterious over the last few weeks." Rachel laughed through her tears, leaning her forehead against James. "And you thought I was worried about filming the documentary?" He smiled, pulling her into a kiss that was met with more applause. The evening turned into a spontaneous celebration. Rachel's students took turns at the piano, playing songs they had secretly rehearsed for the occasion. Martha poured champagne, and stories about the couple were shared amid laughter and tears of joy. Gloria, watching everything with watery eyes, approached James. "You know," she said, "when you left Manhattan, I was devastated for you. But now I see that it wasn't an end, it was a beginning." The PBS crew continued filming, capturing every precious moment. The producer later commented that he had rarely witnessed such a genuine story of transformation and love. As the night wore on, James and Rachel escaped to the winter garden, their special place. Through the glass roof, the stars shone as silent witnesses to their happiness. "Harmony House really lives up to its name now," Rachel commented, snuggling into James' arms. "It's a place where broken stories become love songs. And our music," James replied, kissing her forehead softly, "is just beginning." There under the starry Rhinebeck sky, two souls that fate had brought together through music were planning their future. Harmony House would remain their home, a living testament to how love can turn loss and gain, pain into music, and endings into new beginnings. And so, like a perfect symphony reaching its final chord, this story finds its end, not with sadness or regret, but with the promise of more music, more love, and more stories to be told within the welcoming walls of Harmony House.